Welcome to our Pipsy Media Box. I'm Iman Rapetti.
Good morning, Iman. It's Stephen Linnell here. Nice to be with you.
Stephen, congratulations on your new role. I think you're still no, you're not wet behind the ears. 5 days in. It is a huge animal, BankServe, that you're dealing with a lot of responsibilities in the market. Maybe just share with our audience the scope of your work.
Sure. Maybe I'll break it up into two, what we are and then what we do. So what we do, BankServe creates and operates payments infrastructure for interbank switching, clearing and settlement of transactions. In the South African context, what we are a regulated financial market infrastructure. So we are a systemically important financial market infrastructure, and we effectively, as I mentioned, provide clearing services for the banks on the back of retail payment interactions.
All right, so and that covers a number of different things. We're going to really home in today on, your traditional banking infrastructure and where it sits in a distributed space. Now, I was chuckling as I was preparing for this because I remember as Gen Xers, we've gone through a generation where we've watched our parents use cash to pay for things, then it was plastic to pay for things, then you could use checkbooks to pay for things, and on until we got to the digital space. So we've seen quite a bit of transformation in the space, in the way that transacting is taking place. Just break down what this distributed environment means.
Sure. First of all, thank you for saying I'm on the wrong side of 40. So I think you've hit on a key point there. If I look at probably the biggest trend at the moment is, beyond just the customer base becoming increasingly digitally aware, is the response to that is just this proliferation of payment rails. And that's not necessary in a distributed space. This is just going from cash to EFT to card, both batch and online, and then increasingly into sort of the real-time rapid payment space. So just a massive proliferation in different payment rails, as you would see in any typical sort of competitive environment. And so there's a sort of a race for the winning feature. And part of that race actually is also in the form of money. What form of money do we take? And sort of this is where the distributed technology might come into play in terms of what money is made of in the future.
Because you're taking us straight into blockchain, you're taking us straight into crypto. Again, when we were growing up, you saw a stock exchange as a brick and mortar kind of setup, and now it's not that anymore with the crypto exchanges. Would this encompass what we've just both added to the pot? Would it encompass the world of a distributed environment?
Absolutely. Interesting comment. My first job out of university was at the stock exchange. And I remember reading in the textbooks this sort of open outcry system. And then I joined via another company, the JSE, and I was looking around for the people, and there was no people there. There was just these banks of sort of computer processing. So the world has changed sort of between the time the textbook were written and me joining the industry. And I think that's what we're going to see here at the moment with the form of money. I don't think the man in the street really cares the form of money that it takes. I think they need to know that they can trust it, and they need to know that payments through that form of money are seamless. In fact, no one cares about payments. They care about what they're using the payments for. And so it always gets tricky when we talk about the excitement that is generated around blockchain and distributed ledger, because we talk about how we use new technology to change the way sort of money is affected. But when it comes down to it, that shouldn't be the exciting thing. The exciting thing should be about how this changes people's lives at the end point.
If there's time, I want to circle back to that one around the concept of this idea of how many people are banked, but what that actually means if you look at it from a granular perspective. All right, so you have shared with us how the payments landscape is evolving, but how do these systems talk together? How are they going to harmonize? And this is the traditional banking infrastructure and the distributed environment.
First and foremost, the role that BankServe Africa plays is of an integrator. We connect banks, we connect non-banks into the payment system via their banks. So this connection, this language of connection is critical. And so what we've seen as you've started moving into this distributed ledger type capability is the new payment systems or the new forms of money are no longer or not interoperable with the old forms. And so sort of the promised efficiency that comes with it is impeded by the fact that you keep on having to cross between these rails. And so I think as we build this new market infrastructure, and it is market infrastructure, the first thing that we should do is formalize standards, rules of engagements, so that we can limit the hurdle rate between switching across these various platforms. And it's linked to our earlier comment around just the proliferation of payment rails. With each of those payment rails comes an inefficiency in terms of switching.
What are the biggest victims in that, in those inefficiencies? What gets lost there?
Well, I think with friction comes cost. So the end user loses through the lack of the ability to gain the benefit of this sort of new platform, because they're just carrying the frictional cost of inappropriate implementation or inappropriate pre-planning in terms of the roadmap for new technology deployments. So the end user is the one who suffers ultimately.
The end user, me, people like me. Given an environment where people feel so hard done by, banking charges, the fear of the unknown, trust issues as well with corporations, how do they co-journey into the new?
So I think education is obviously the most important. I mean, in a country like South Africa, where we've got a legacy of poor digital education, it's even more critical. And I think banks' market infrastructure should play a much more active role in educating sort of the do's and don'ts of transacting through different payment rails and the risks of those. So probably an interesting segue is, and you mentioned it earlier when we spoke about trust, is we're starting to see a sort of a shift in trust in sort of the global landscape, whereas before your trust was so tightly coupled to sort of your government or your sort of geographic borders, but there's new barriers of trust now. There's trust within social media systems, and so people look to those areas to educate them, or at least to provide a barrier of trust for them when they transact. So I think that sort of platform ecosystem is important.
And then you have the unintended consequence of a pandemic type moment, which raises the anxiety levels of people, but they're not sure who to trust. Remember all the debates around vaccines and so on. So I want to push that aside, because that is massive in and of itself. But what does the future look like for us? I know the introduction of PayShap in March this year was heavily trumpeted. You did that in conjunction with the Reserve Bank and with the partnership of agencies like PASA. So these collaborations really allow you to be creative in this environment.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's all about collaboration when you have multiple players pursuing slightly different commercial interests. If you step back and you say, what is the end goal of all of this? You need a mechanism to facilitate cohesion. And market infrastructures such as Bank Serve Africa play a huge role in bringing people to the table and driving a singular agenda. And we see our role in the national payment system to do exactly that. Bring the participants together, have a consolidated and cohesion goal, and pursue it. And that's exactly what happened with PayShap. We brought the industry along a journey, and we've now delivered the first phase of PayShap.
Why do you think its take-up has not been exponential?
I think there's probably two things. The first, we spoke about trust. One has to get used to using a new system. So the more you use, the more you get comfortable. So that's the first element. The second element is that this is a phased rollout. So sort of the first phase was just account-to-account payments, you to me. We see a lot of the transactions going through the economy is obviously on the back of a commercial arrangement at Spaza Shop or at a retailer. And so I think the latter parts of the PayShap journey is going to unlock those use cases. And that's where the volume will generate from.
So this distributed environment to, a greenie like me seems to be fairly elastic. There's malleability, there's the opportunity to iterate, there's also agility because you can move things around quite quickly. Then you come to the brick and mortar, legacy edifices around and this world in which banking operates. How do you get two things which seem to be fundamentally different in their structure, their approach, their strategy to begin to, coalesce and work together?
One of the speakers yesterday mentioned how critical it is for banks and market infrastructures to deliver trust, risk management and trust. But they said it was not sufficient. They said the minute you stop innovating, you move from first place to second place. So I think it has to be part of the strategy, and we have to allow for small calculated failures in low risk environments to engender that culture of trying new things. And so long as you compartmentalize it into small low risk areas, then I think you can handle it. But market infrastructure and banks just have a massive role to play in the economy, and so you can't make too many mistakes at large scale. And so it's understandable that there's this duopoly that they're in.
It sounds to me like thinking in small bets.
Thinking in small bets.
Stephen, it's been a pleasure. I wish we had more time to talk
Wonderful.
about this. Good luck in your role. I'm sure we'll see some headlines soon.
Cheerio. Bye.
Stephen, thank you so much.
Thank you.